What's going on, guys? Art from Madness here, and as you can see in front of me, we have our Madness MAXFlow right there, and then we have the stock Abarth airbox there. And what's a little bit different on this video is we're going to be updating a little bit of instructions for those of you that have the 2015 and newer Abarths with the 1.4 multi-air turbo that are purchasing the MAXFlow right there. So there's a couple different connections we're going to go over. We're going to show you what comes with the kit we have on the table here. And then we're going to show you disassembly of the stock airbox and what you're going to reuse. So stay tuned. We'll get this all disassembled and we'll explain first on the factory airbox what we're going to reuse. All right, so now that we're back, the biggest changes that we have on the 2015 and newer Abarths are going to be they rerouted some of the hard lines that you see here. These two lines are new that the customers with the 2012s to 2014s don't have. And then the other thing that's new is the addition of the crankcase sensor that you can see right there that's bolted to the airbox. So we're going to show you what we're going to do to adapt that for your MAXFlow if you happen to have a 2015 to current Abarth. And we're going to get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these two torque screws that are T20s that hold the sensor in place here. We're going to remove this retaining plate, and it's going to allow us to free the sensor up. So we're going to be careful not to drop them. We're going to put these out of the way. You're not going to reuse the screws. So with that out of the way, this little retainer slips out, and then you just wiggle the sensor free. So there it is. There's our crankcase pressure sensor. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. Second thing is we're going to get the factory ducting that goes from the vent on the top of the head where this would normally attach to. We're going to free it from the airbox, and then it attaches underneath. So we're going to flip this upside down. And you see we have a little clamp, so we're just going to loosen this. I'm going to have to put the camera down, and I'm going to have to loosen it with some pliers, and then we're going to take this off. Okay, so you can see here I took off the hose. I just moved the hose clamp back, and then I was able to just gently pull it off. And then the last piece we're going to remove are going to be these two hard lines here. So we're going to flip the box upside down. Now here's the part that you want to look at. So these lines come off by depressing these tabs here. So if you press in, it will release a locking mechanism. You can pull them off. You just loosen this little clip retainer here so that you can put the lines to the side. And then we're going to come back and you're going to see these lines removed, and then we're going to address this little insert block that goes in the inside of the airbox. Okay, so we're back. So now we've removed the two lines that are sitting right over there. And now we're going to pull this insert out. So this is just pressure fit on the inside. We're going to need to gently pry on it using like a nylon pry tool. And that's going to allow us to remove that insert because we're going to reuse that with the lines we just removed from it. But first we need to get it out of the factory airbox. So I'm just going to pull on it and we'll get it out of there. Okay, so this is the little insert we just removed, and you can see that little O-ring. That's what seals it when it gets inserted into this box. That's the orientation it gets locked in at. And all I did was, it's tight, it's locked in, now it's not, but when it's first in there, the gap right here is actually much smaller because that O-ring seated in there. All I did was got a little flathead screwdriver, a small one, and just gently pried on each side, wiggled it a little so that O-ring started coming out, and then it did exactly what it did there. It just fell right out. So now we have all our pieces that we're going to be reusing right here to mount to the MAXFlow intake. And we're going to put this off to the side. We don't need this anymore. We're going to wrap it up nicely, so if we ever need to put it back in for whatever reason, it's clean, it's ready to go. And then these parts we're going to transplant over to the MAXFlow, and we'll get started right now. Okay, so now you can see we have our MAXFlow intake here. We have our couple of vacuum tube fittings here, and then we have all of the hardware that we had before that we reused off of the factory intake. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to see how all this sets up. So if you look at the actual intake itself, it's loosely put together here. I'm going to show you what everything's going to do before we actually put it together so you kind of get an idea. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our little Y connection here. You can see we have a very short run of hose and a large diameter, and then we have two of the same size hoses that one's a little bit longer than the other. What's going to happen is on the back of the airbox here, we have a fitting. That fitting is going to accept the longer of the two side hoses, and then on the other end of that same size we're going to put the crank sensor there, and then on the other end of that, the largest of the two, we're going to reuse our tube, and that's going to go in like that. So we have long 3/8 line goes to the carbon canister. the short line goes to the sensor, and then the large fitting obviously is only going to fit on the large vacuum tube that we reused. Then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to reconnect these lines here to the distribution block, and then we're going to plumb that in to this 3/8 push to lock fitting. So this hose is going to go on the end of that fitting, and then it's going to, obviously it's flexible. The hose that you get is longer. I just use this because it would have been too long for the table. And then that end is going to go onto the side with the O-ring on it right here. So that's going to plug in there. And then these two lines that have the push to lock fittings are going to reattach to the same fittings they did before. So let me get that together and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so we got everything roughly set up where everything goes. I'm going to pay attention up here. So you see we have our longer line attached. It's not pushed all the way on because we're going to do this in the car. We'll show you some more pictures later. And it's going to attach there to the fitting on the carbon canister. Then we go to the smaller of the two lines that takes the end of the sensor. Your electrical connection for your sensor is going to plug in right there. And then the actual factory tubing that we used here is going to install right on the end of that. And then when we come back to our distribution block, we can see that we have both of the lines, the push to lock fittings with the gray tabs, back onto the respective fittings. And then this side, that is the only remaining side left with the O-ring on it, is going to attach to your piece of hose. Again, this will be longer so you can tuck everything away nice and neat. And then the other side is going to slide all the way on, again it's loose here, to the end of the push to lock fitting. And then this guy right here has a factory small vacuum line that is in the same location for all model years of the Abarth that you're just going to install. We'll show you that on the car. So basically what this is going to do is going to allow you to retain your functionality with your crankcase sensor here. It's going to allow you to maintain the same functionality with your recirculatory system on this side, and then the same over here too. So everything's going to be hooked up. You're going to be 100% ready to run, and that's how we're going to put it in the car. So we're going to go back out, we're going to get this installed. We'll give some more still shots and some more photos of that installation, but on the tabletop it's a lot easier to see than in the engine bay where it's a little dark and the angles are kind of funky. Alright guys, so now we're back under the car, and like I promised, we're going to show you a little bit more of a detailed install of how the routing in terms of the vacuum lines goes for the 2015 and newer Abarths with our MAXFlow intake. So what I ended up doing, you couldn't really pick up a lot of the vacuum line colors with the black tubing, so I went ahead and I changed it out for this red tubing. It does come with black, so it's more discreet, but the red stood out for the video purposes. That's why we went with that. So if you're going to look now, we're going to talk about those connections I showed you we made earlier, and we're going to start here on the driver's side. So this is our factory tube we removed that comes up to that Y adapter. So there's that big fitting that slides right on the end of the factory pipe, and then we have our two connections. In the back here, let me see if I can get it out. This is the crankcase sensor, and you can see it just slides with a pressure fit. If you see that O-ring, the size of the tubing on the inside diameter is enough to where when you push that down, it stays seated and it stays secure. So we're just going to pop that back in there. And then we come to this other line, which I'll get to in a second. And then next we're going to jump over to that distribution block. This is the one that was in the bottom of the factory airbox that had the two hard lines that you can see here installed. This is the side with the orange tubing that has, or excuse me, the red tubing that has the O-ring on it. So the other two side of the lines went and slipped back into their factory connections back over here. And then we have the tube that runs from the O-ring side of the distribution block, comes down. You can route this, there's plenty of length, so you can route it whichever way you'd like. And it connects to the actual turbo side pipe on that 3-inch push to lock fitting. And like I told you, everything's bottoming out and seated fully. And then we have this little guy here that accepts this little connection that all the cars have in the same location right there. Just pushes right on. And then lastly, we're going to jump back to this only connection that isn't connected to anything. And the reason it's not connected to anything is we needed to show you everything else underneath. So I'm going to grab the canister and I'm going to show you where that goes right now. So on our canister, you see we have the fitting on the inlet side. That's the side that is going to attach to the other portion of the Y fitting right there. So when you put your canister in place and you slide it in, I'm going to try and do this with one hand. You slide it in place, which is, we'll just leave it there. Basically what's going to happen, oh look, I got a little assistance, thank you. There we go. So you're going to see that connection is all the way in the back. It's a little dark back there, that's why we showed you out on the table earlier. All that's going to happen is you're going to get this remaining long side connection, and then you're going to push it in place on the end of that fitting. Now I've lubed everything up with silicone spray so it slides on real nice and easy, and that's going to finish our connections. So we have our factory hose here, comes into the Y fitting large side, then it goes to our crank sensor in the back, goes to the canister, and then underneath here our little distribution block is going to run, it's going to get routed, and it's going to connect to the intake tube here. So that's going to finish off. Now obviously there's no pipe here yet because that would block our view, but we're going to clean up everything nice, change out the hosing for black tubing, and that's how you hook up 2015 to current MAXFlow intake. Thanks for watching, guys.